Evidence for Conviction. That's the title of today's book on what we're reading, episode 41. Here it is, Evidence for Conviction, a book written by my good friend, Randal K. Porter, a sportsman, a family man, a policeman, and now a coach. And he's written a book which is a combination of apologetics, evidences for the Christian faith, and his own life story, his childhood, his work in the police force, and much more. I think you're going to find it fascinating. Randal agreed to be interviewed, so what's coming up today is my interview with Randal and links to his own website, his coaching website, and also how you can get a hold of the book yourself if you'd like to purchase it. I think you'd find it very interesting. Without further ado, here's the interview. Well, this is fabulous. Thanks for putting the time aside to talk to me today, Randal, because I'm very grateful. Anybody I know has written a book. I know it's a huge undertaking, having written one myself, and I admire you for doing it. And I think it'd be great to get this to as a wide as audience as possible. And if I can help in any way, I'm glad to do that. So I thought maybe we could have a chat about what went into this, what your hopes are for it, and let people know, put this out there, and I hope more people will get a copy for themselves.
Sure.
But perhaps to start at the beginning, what was it that gave you the idea for writing the book?
So the idea, a very good school teacher when I was 12 years old planted a seed in me, and they said, I remember it very clearly. I was 12 years old. A teacher came in, he was reading our essays, and he was reading mine, and he kept looking up at me. I could see in my peripheral vision, he kept on looking at the essay he was reading, he kept on looking at me. And then he took the trouble to hand me my essay, and I think he scored me a 19 out of 20 or something. And he said, Randal, you write a hell of a story. So that planted the seed that maybe I've got a little bit of a flair for writing. And that never went away. And then I decided, I gave myself a goal one day, I think it was in about 2016, I decided, I want to write a book. And I want it to be about faith. And just to fill in a gap, what inspired that was the course that you started, the School of Missions. Because I signed up for that course wanting to increase my Bible knowledge and my understanding of the evidences. But I got something from that course that I never bargained for. That course was like a fertilizer for my faith. It really was. My faith just went boom. And the interesting thing was, I was at the time, must have been 20 years in on my Christian journey. And I hadn't grasped just how credible the evidence was.
Right.
I hadn't grasped it for myself. So I thought, well, look, I'm a Christian, 20 years, I read my Bible every day, and I haven't grasped it. The chances are the average Christian hasn't grasped it either. Mm. And it was from there, really. It was just about, I'm excited by this. It's really inspiring. It's inspired me. Let me see if I can chronicle that and inspire others. The fact that I had something that others don't normally have. I'm not an academic. I don't have a degree in theology. But my unique perspective was that I was a police detective who asked a lot of questions. Not just any police detective. I was a police detective who worked for 3 years on homicide, so you could say I was at the top of my profession. So I thought, let me use that credential and let's get a book out there just to demonstrate that Christianity is an evidence-based faith, not something that's just about a warm and fuzzy feeling inside.
Yes, much more than that. It might include that, but it's much more than that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love the angle you're coming from in the book about that and the title, fits so well with that. Evidence for Conviction. I like, there's such a To me, it's a unique angle. I don't think I've ever seen that angle before, which adds a lot of punch to the whole thing. Gives it an added strength and an interest. So what, you've already touched on it, I think, but what would you say is your main hope for the book?
So, first and foremost, I'd love for those closest to me to read it. It's a tool to reach out to my family. So that's my primary motive. I'd love it to end up on the School of Missions reading list. After all, it's a fruit of the School of Missions. So if it ended up on the reading list to inspire other people coming through the School of Missions, that would be an awesome little ticky box. I'd love that. And like any other book writer, if I walk into Waterstones in a year's time and it's there on the shelf, there'll be a big beaming smile on my face. I'd love it to sell, and I'd love it to plant seeds of faith in multitudes. Just a Christian resource that inspires those who pick it up and read it. It's quite a small book. It's only 170 pages, I think, but I think it packs a powerful punch. And in a way, it imitates my favourite book of the Bible. My favourite book of the Bible is the Gospel of Mark. It's 16 chapters. It's dynamic. It's the shortest of the four Gospels. It teaches you everything you need to know about the mission and purpose of Jesus. That's my go-to book that I recommend people to read when I'm sharing my faith. And I'd like my book, Evidence for Conviction, to be like that small and powerful apologetics book that can inspire people. So that's the vision and hope for the book.
I can see why the Gospel of Mark fits for you, because in the Gospel of Mark, you keep getting that phrase, immediately. Jesus did this, and immediately that, then that, then that, then that. It's like Jesus in Mark is the man of action. Yeah. And I think that's true of you. You're kind of the man of action, whether it's the martial arts or the boxing or the football, or you and I came across each other occasionally on the football pitch back in the day.
Well, we did.
I remember.
We did indeed. I think we were both centre halves.
That's right. I don't think we often clashed physically because we were at opposite ends of the pitch.
Yeah, yeah. And I was a defensive centre half, so I didn't go up for corners. I always stayed back. So we steered well clear of each other.
That was probably wise. Probably wise. But you're right. It is, and it's very readable. The book is, not only is it not long, as you say, about 170 pages. I read it in less than a week myself. But it's also very readable. It's not filled full of complex. The arguments are profound, but they're not presented in a very complex way. Anybody can find their way through into the material you're talking about here. Yeah. So I think it's a great strength of the book.
Yeah, I deliberately wanted to produce something that was non-academic, that just flowed, was an easy read, and I think it's ticked those boxes. Of the people that have read it, I've had some really good feedback about its conversational style and the flow of it, so that was very encouraging.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I felt like I was in a conversation with you. Now you say it that way. That's how I felt. I felt like I was listening to you, especially because I know you. I could hear your voice, in a sense, coming out of the book. I think that's a wonderful thing, because you don't want, in a book where you're trying to persuade somebody, I think you want to try and avoid the sense of being preached at. That doesn't come across very well. It's not personable, but you don't preach in the sense of being preachy. You lay out persuasive arguments, but you do it in a way that is very human and personal to you. I like that.
Thank you. I like that you like that, Malcolm.
We'll have a like fest here. So let's say, here's a question for you. So let's say I've got a friend who I'm thinking, I wonder if this might help them. What would you think you're talking about seeds and fertile ground. If I was thinking now, who might this book be useful for other than your own family? But, if it was me or somebody else watching this thinking, who might this be for, if not for themselves, but for a friend? What kind of person do you think might benefit most from your book?
I think so. Somebody that has a faith, a belief in God, but just not sure about the whole Jesus and Bible thing. That would be ideal, really. It's an easy sell. Look, somebody I know was a detective, asked a lot of questions. He's written a book. It's a very short book. It might be of interest to you. Someone like that who can read the arguments and go through the book quickly and think, oh, okay, so it is reasonable to believe in these things. Also, you're Christian, especially you're Christian whose faith is weak. I was a Christian for many years whose faith was weak. And I wrote about this a little bit in the book. I remember a year into my Christian journey, I would be reading about Jesus walking on water and calming storms, and I'd be asking myself, do I actually believe this?
Yeah, right.
I'm a baptized Christian for a year. So I'm 28 years in now, and I would say I've reached the point where my faith is solid. But there was definitely a large chunk of my Christian life where my faith wasn't solid. I was actually weak in faith. So the Christian who's weak in their faith, and this is a common phenomenon in the church. Jesus despaired of his disciples, "Oh, you of little faith."
Yes.
So it's not unique to your modern Christian. This has always been there. The disciples who were around Jesus, saw the miracles, were still weak in their faith. So I think, so the Christian who's weak in their faith, and the skeptic, the person that thinks, oh, Bible, myths and legends. Well, okay, have a look at the chapter that talks about the integrity of the New Testament manuscripts. Did you know that there's actually ways that we can test the reliability of manuscripts? And when you compare the Bible to other manuscripts, the Bible wins hands down. It's not even a close contest. It's a no contest. I didn't know that. 20 years into the Christian faith, I hadn't quite grasped just how the scholars would measure the reliability of the New Testament. And then when you see the evidence and the reliability through those evidential eyes, that is like fertilizer for your faith. It makes you, rather than cringe from going out and sharing your faith because you might come up with the difficult questions, oh, the Bible's been changed. Well, actually, what do you mean the Bible's been changed? When was it changed? I mean, you can talk about, well, hang on, do you know how many different manuscripts there are from the early centuries of the Bible? There's thousands. How can somebody go around and change thousands of the manuscripts? You just have conversations around that.
Yeah, I really like that section of the book very much, actually. For a lot of people, the idea of apologetics sounds too complicated. But it's not really. It doesn't have to be anyway. Well,
you can also, Malcolm, have a fun explaining to people what apologetics means. No, I'm not apologising for being a Christian. I'm actually defending the faith.
Exactly. Yeah, well, it doesn't sound like the right word when you use it, but it is. That's right. Can I ask you about the actual writing? Because for some people who might watch this, they may have a book in them, like I think most people do. But it can be quite an intimidating idea to consider writing a book and thinking about where do you start and so on. So was there anything about the actual writing of the book that was particularly useful to you as a lesson in life, or a lesson in writing, or a lesson in being creative? Was there anything about the writing that maybe you learned even about yourself that was helpful to you?
It reinforced, I enjoy writing. It comes natural. It's not difficult for me to write. So it reinforced that how much I enjoy the creativity side of writing. Long story short, when I was younger, I was creative and I was also into sports. I chose the sports route. So the creative side of me kind of got put to one side and on hold. Obviously, as I got older and body started to break up a little bit, I couldn't be quite so sporty. I went back into the creative side. So it sort of reawakened that creative side of me that I had kind of put on the shelf. So that was really enjoyable. That's fun. Just remembering, I am quite creative and I enjoy this side of things. So that was one aspect that was really beneficial for me. Something else that was really useful, though, was about my life timeline, because it's, as you know, the book's biographical. So I chronicle my walk. I go from younger years to the present day. And it helped me put some dots together, because I used, and I wrote about this in the book, I used to get a recurring dream. And it was completely random, and it was a nightmare. And I couldn't figure out, why am I having this dream all the time? It just seemed completely out of context. But when I looked at where I was and the decisions I made as a youngster, and some of the people that I was very close to, who ended up on the wrong side of the law, and some of the situations I was beginning to get involved with, compared to where I ended up, the road I went on. So some of my friends, you could say, went on the broad and spacious road. I went in through the narrow gate. That nightmare I had started to make sense. I suddenly started to realise, oh, okay, I could have ended up there. And I know God speaks to people in dreams. It's all through the Bible. God speaks to people in dreams. Now, God didn't appear to me in my dream. There was no sense of God in my dream. But it was a profound dream. It was powerful. It was a nightmare. It was tangible. It was so tangible that I actually wondered, have I done this thing? And have I sort of put it in my subconscious to protect myself? And that dream just started to make sense, because it was a very profound and tangible dream. And I realised years and years after, oh, so that's possibly why I was having that dream, because it was an indication of where I could have gone with my life. And my life completely U-turned. So I could have gone one way, which was a route that would have put me on the wrong side of the law. And I went completely the other way, and I became the law. So, and it was profound. And I hadn't joined those dots together. I knew I had this recurring nightmare, and I'd forgotten about it. I'm not having it anymore, so it's history. But when I looked at the timeline of my life, I realised, wow, that was a powerful message. Could have well been from God, that message, just to show me where I could have ended up.
So part of writing the book was about looking back over your life and at that timeline, and perhaps the way that God had intervened or guided you along the way.
Definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so do you have a favourite part of the book? Any bit that really, when you wrote it, you thought, I'm so glad I can get this across. I'm so glad I can share this story or this bit of information, anything like that?
Yeah, my son Jordan asked me this question, and I remember I said no, but since then I've reflected. And I think my favourite part of the book is when I'm playing a football match, and the penny's dropping that, you know what, you can't be going to church and then losing the plot on the football pitch. And I was the hard man of the teams I played for. I was the one that was relied upon to get stuck in. But the problem was this was leading to confrontations, and I wasn't adverse to the physical side of things. If things got out of hand, I would start throwing punches, long story short. And in order to curtail this, I remember I got this wristband and I wrote on it, "Honour Jesus." And there was one match in particular where everyone was expecting a confrontation because they knew what I was like, and I didn't take liberty taking when people started to kick out players. And that instant where I'm confronted with this guy and everyone's expecting a fight to take off, and I said to him, Jesus loves you.
I'd love to have been there.
And I think that's my favourite moment, because it's the first time I actually shared my faith. I'm not a baptised disciple yet, but I'm trying to change. And the reader probably won't, well, maybe they will, but when I said that, he turned away from me looking extremely confused.
I bet he did.
But it totally diffused the situation. So I suppose in all the writing, that is the moment. I call it the Jesus loves you man incident.
Oh, I'd love to have seen it. That must have been quite something. I bet a lot of those players were talking about that for quite a long time after.
They probably were. They were certainly talking about it when I came into the changing room at the end of the match. They were still talking about it.
That is so funny. But I think that's, again, one of the things I really enjoyed about the book, Randal, is most books I've read on apologetics are honestly decent often, but dry. So I have other books on my bookshelf here, which I refer to and I use when people ask questions and I'm refreshing my memory on particular issues. But they're quite dry. And then the other kinds of books, which I do like, are testimony books. And they're great. I've got, again, autobiographical or biographical sort of testimony books here. And I like those. But they're often quite short on something concrete, something that you can say, oh, I can see why the Bible helped you. I can see how that changed you. I can see how God's truth has intersected with your life. And you don't often get this truth and life going together. And I think one of the strengths of your book is that you get that truth and life. And I loved all those stories, whether it was the football pitch or your youth, or stories from your time in the police force. It brought it alive. I felt like I was almost watching an episode of some drama, except that it's things that actually happened to you. And I think bringing those two things together is one of the most valuable things you've done here, because it's in my experience rare. So I thank you very much for doing that.
I'm really pleased you said that, because I wrestled for quite some time whether I should separate the two and have one book on apologetics and one book that was biographical. And when I first wrote the book, it started off with the biographical side. I then decided, you know what, my transformation in character is almost as evidential as the evidence. The two sort of go hand in hand, because the Word of God changed me. So let's run it together. And then the tweak I decided to go with the evidence first. So if people are still interested in the book after reading the evidence, they might stay interested to reading my story, which is why I switched the journey to the second part of the book. Because no one's heard of Randal Porter, so who would want to read about my journey? But everybody might want to read about the evidence. So that's why I switched it around and ran the two together.
Do you have any more projects in mind? What's next in the pipeline? Do you have anything you're working on?
I do, yeah. Well, I wrote a ebook in February, 7 Keys for Spiritual Growth and Revival, which was on my website as a free resource. I've since withdrawn that from my website, and I'm going to expand on it. It's only about 11,000 words. It's an ebook. What I'd like to do is expand on that and have that published as a paperback as well, as a coaching resource for Christians. So that's my next project. I've got a project after that, and I've got other ideas. So there's certainly lots of books in my head that need to come out onto paper. Good.
Well, that's excellent to hear. Is there anything we haven't talked about today that you'd like to talk about in terms of the book, or its purpose, or what you hope for it, or anything else really? Anything to add?
one thing I would like to add is the title. I want to give credit to Mike D'Souza for that.
Mike, okay.
Because when I wrote the book, it was actually called A Seed of Faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote the entire book, and it was always called A Seed of Faith. And just to use an analogy, I was trying to demonstrate in the book how a small seed of faith, there's a little seed there, holding in my hands, could end up something like this.
Oh, nice.
How your faith can grow.
Yeah.
And that's what the book was about. But as I wrote the book, I realised the main reason faith grows that way is because of the evidence. So I remember having a conversation with Mike D'Souza, who was kind enough to endorse the book for me. He wrote me a very nice foreword. And I remember I said to him, what do you think of the title? So he gave me some good feedback about the book. He says, I really enjoyed the book. It's a good book. And he was happy to endorse it for me. But I remember saying to Mike, what do you think of the title? And he went,
Okay, thanks, Mike.
So I liked the fact that he endorsed the book, but I wasn't very enthusiastic about the So I said, well, Mike, what would you suggest as a title? And he went, how about Evidence for Conviction? It was the first thing he said. It got me straight away. I thought, of course.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Perfect. And the more I thought about that, the more I saw it fit. And it just goes to show you've got to be open and adaptable, because it was always a seed of faith. It's always about faith, how faith grows, and it's about evidence, fertilising faith. And it was always going to be called Evidence for Conviction. And then right at the last minute, when I finished the book, all we're doing now is we're getting it copy edited, getting rid of all the typos and grammatical errors, which were there in abundance. And then, we just changed the title, and I think the title fits perfectly. So I'll give big credit and thanks to Mike D'Souza for that.
Yeah. No, Mike is very good with words. That's one of his gifts.
Yeah.
And I think it is the perfect title. I really like it. Randal, what about if people want to get hold of a copy? How would they get hold of a copy of the book?
So it's been published by Kingdom Publishers. We're a publishing house based in Enfield. I've also got a landing page that I've set up so people can buy it from my landing page. And anyone that does that will benefit from a £2.99 discount, so early bird discount. So those are the two ways currently. I'm not currently shipping abroad because of the costs, so it's UK mainland only. However, the publisher assures me that they will be shipping abroad when they go live with it. From what I can glean, it's a slow process, so they will be approaching your Waterstones and your big book sellers, but it's down to them whether they choose to stock the book. So it's probably going to be a bit of a slow process. But in answer to your question, if anyone wants to buy the book, I've got a landing site set up. I'll send you the link, so when you do the edit, you can maybe
I'll put it in. Yeah.
Put the link in. And my website, randalporter.com, which is a coaching page. But there'll be a link to my website, from my website to the landing page as well.
Well, thanks, Randal, for joining me for the interview. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We're old friends and old adversaries on the football pitch, although both of us are a bit beyond that these days. But we still have a desire for the Christian life to be as adventurous as it can be. And I really appreciate the book. If you're thinking about whether to buy the book or not, I would say this. Definitely buy the book if you want to support Randal and his work. It's so important that men and women of faith write and express the reasons for their faith. And if it's only to support Randal and encourage him, I would buy the book. Secondly, if you're anybody who has an interest in apologetics, especially written from a very straightforward perspective, I think you'll really get a lot out of the book. And thirdly, I'd say, I just love the stories. The stories of his own life, his childhood, his work in the police and various other aspects of his life are faith-building, they're inspiring, they're informative, and they shed light on the way that one should think about evidence as a former homicide detective himself. So I thoroughly recommend the book, and I hope you get a chance to buy it and read it. And if you've got any other book suggestions, I'd like to have them. If you read the book and then have your thoughts, your own thoughts about it, please send them to me. I'd like to know what you think. And let me know what else you'll read. So until the next time, let's keep learning and let's keep reading. Take care and God bless.